My name is AJ Fenlason. I am the Strategic Services Manager for Monk Development. Our product, Ecclesia 360, powers a lot of, most of the church websites that we have. We also have nonprofits and institutions as well. So part of that is it's a content management system. We build websites off of that for churches, nonprofits, and there are a couple schools on our system. What I'm going to be talking about today is really kind of different than what everybody else has been talking about, I hope. That's the goal at least, because we're going to talk about taking the mission, vision, and values that people have been sharing, like this is so important, and trying to translate that down into actionable steps or what I call assets for your ministry. So part of that, we're going to dive into what mission, vision, and values do. Real brief, because we've already heard, I think, enough of that at this conference. And then the next piece is just how do we live out our mission, vision, and values. Understanding that there's an audience that we're trying to reach and how do those two overlap. So to get started, I think I'll move into kind of the next thing. So with mission, vision, and values, it creates a clear direction for your organization. They're guiding principles, intangible and aspirational. So some of those principles and values and mission statements that people have been sharing about aren't things that you can touch, or they're things that you're hoping to accomplish in the future. So that's what that's talking about, intangible and aspirational. The other piece of it is they're supposed to encourage and elicit a response from your audience. So understanding that, and when I'm talking about mission, these are kind of the things that I'm talking about when we're in that realm. And from there, the other piece of ministry process design is understanding your people, so the congregations, your audience. There's really two ways to go about doing this. I generally approach it more from the audience, so new, regular, engaged, and mature, and we'll define that and we'll walk through that. The other option, which some of you probably know, how many people know about personas? Okay, so we got one. So I'll share a little bit about that now. Basically, it's a fictional representation of your ideal, in this case, I put church visitor. For a business, it's your ideal client. This is where you're getting into and understanding pretty much everything about them. You're saying, our ideal client is 45, they've got 2 children. So you're building this fictional character, and then the idea is that once you have that fictional character built up, you market or share information or kind of communicate to them. So what's important to a mom with 2 kids? Well, that's what we're going to have on our new here page on a church website. That's where persona kind of comes into play and what it does. With the audiences, it's really different. We're looking at a broad spectrum. So there might be a lot of different people that fall into, say, a new category. So they've either never been to your church or organization before, or they've been 1 or 2 times. So there's that kind of aspect of this new person. A regular person, they're coming and they're engaged pretty much for a church standing, they're coming on Sunday, and that's about the extent of their engagement. The engaged person, they're in small groups, they're serving, they're really bought into your mission, and they're growing kind of spiritually on their own. And then the last piece is the mature, and those are the people that are leading groups, they're serving. But at the same time, you can't just say anybody that's leading is mature. You also have to have the spiritual components. And the next slides kind of dive into a study that really looked at these audiences and what's happening with them. So it was called the Reveal Study. And so for a new audience, one of the things that they found, so this study looked at 1,000 churches and 250 members of the congregation of those 1,000 churches over a 4-year period of time. So with that, what they found with the new audience is the longer the person attends the church, the less likely they are to follow Christ. What that's saying is they're not involved in ministry, they're not going deeper, and then the second part comes in, only 25% of them are involved in community building activities. So what this comes down to is that new person is just showing up, and they're not getting involved, they're not getting deeper, and as a result, they're not becoming followers of Christ. And I think to hit on that, one of the things that we found is a lot of churches and organizations are driving to get to this new person. So they have marketing efforts, they've got social media. It's really to try and attract new people to the church or the organization. And the problem is they haven't really thought through the other three audiences. And as a result, they're not able to connect and help those people move deeper into kind of spiritual development. We'll kind of move into the regular attendance. And I think we've all experienced this. I think the term that's used in the church world is pew warmer. So they come on Sunday, they sit, and they don't do anything beyond that. So participation in church activities does not necessarily drive spiritual growth. And as an organization, that's one of our things that we're going after with our mission, our vision, and values. I don't think I've ever talked with a church that has said, yeah, we just want people to be how they are now. We don't want them to grow. We don't want them to do anything. They just show up and we're good with that. So they're really looking for growth, and that's part of the mission piece. The last piece, and I think this is what everybody's striving for to create in their organizations, churches mostly. Faith in Christ is no longer defined by an event that happens once or twice a week. So these are people that have kind of ownership of their spiritual journey. And this is what we're trying to drive towards and kind of guide with our digital communications and how we set up our digital ministries. And so when we talk about the ministry process, it's really the intersection of both of those. So you have your audience, and then you have the people, right? And then you have your mission, vision, and values. And where do those overlap? And where do they kind of come together? And then it's also the programs and processes you put in place in order to connect a person from your mission into, the person into the mission. And when we're looking at that, there's really three questions that generally help to understand that person. So how do we encourage people to live out our mission? Because that's what we're talking about. We have people in our congregations, people that come to our organizations. How do we connect them to what we're doing or what we're trying to accomplish? The other one is, how do we translate our mission? So we might have a mission. How are we translating that? What are the actionable steps that can connect someone to it? And the last piece is, where does our mission differ from reality? And that's really an understanding of, if we want to take people here and they're here, how do we bring those two together? And I think that comes into like the next thing. So when we're talking about how do we encourage people to live out our mission, part of that's on-ramps. So how do we connect people to our organization? How do we connect people into ministry opportunities? The other is resources, and then calls to action. An example of this, we did a study with a church and talked with their ministry process that they were trying to get people was into small groups. And when they described how they went about that, the on-ramps, the resources, and the calls to action, they had a process that later, the best way that they could describe it was, under a blue moon, maybe once every 15 years, we'll be able to connect someone to a small group. What they had set up was, okay, you fill out this form when you're on campus, then it'll go ahead and be directed to a volunteer. That volunteer will contact that ministry person, the person that's trying to get connected to a small group. They'll set up a 15-minute meeting in person. After they've had that meeting in person, they would contact 3 or 4 of the group leaders to see if that person was a good fit for that ministry or that small group. And then from that, the person would go back and set up a meeting between the individual and the small group leader that made the best fit. And then after that point, someone would be connected into a small group. So you can see the ministry process, the way that they're trying to connect people to their mission, their vision, and values. So getting people connected into ministry and connected with each other had a process that was just way too complicated. What we ended up working with them on was, how do we make that on-ramp simpler? So it was a small group finder on their website so that people could find small groups, taking out the middleman. The call to action was look, filter, find the group that's right for you, and then contact the leader. And so they were able to kind of do this. And so that's where you're coming in. So like, how do we encourage people to live out our mission? You have to build the on-ramps so that people can connect with your mission. You have to provide them the resources so that they understand and where your mission is going. And then calls to action, so ask them or elicit them to take and make a response. So that's kind of how do you go about doing that. The other piece is, how do we translate our mission? So there's really 3 key areas to do that. You can show somebody, tell, and act. And I think those are all together. You can't just show somebody, like, this is our mission. So just hitting on the why, it's important, but if you just did that, you're not showing or telling someone and giving them an opportunity to act and become a part of that. You're just showing them, okay, this is something that could happen. And so when we're looking at audiences, what they found is if you're not kind of showing, acting, or telling, you're leaving people in the new and regular. So those areas where they're not getting involved, they're not being connected. So when you show somebody, so that's a story of somebody who has life change. So that's our mission. We're trying to get people connected in communities. Let's show a story of people who have actually got connected into a community. And then telling people, hey, we've got communities. This is one of the things we value as a church. And holding up your mission and having it connecting and being there for people to see. And then the last piece is act. And so that's a double-sided thing. So it's not just that you're expecting that person to act. You're doing things to help people. So you're acting in a way that will support your mission, vision, and values. One of the churches that we work with, the small groups again, so generally that's something that churches are looking for, right? We want to get people connected in communities. One of the churches that we work with had 150 different small groups spread across, I want to say they said 6 different campuses. And the goal that they were trying to reach was, how do we get people connected in community? That's one of our mission, that's one of our values, that's what we're really striving for. And for them, it was a finder, so that someone can come on and see, well, I'm available on Wednesday nights. My kids might be doing sports on Tuesdays, and so I'm available Wednesday night. What groups are in my area? Put in your zip code and you're searching, you find a group that makes sense for you and you're able to contact them. The other piece of that is they wanted to grow their community. So they had 150, but that wasn't enough to support what they wanted to do. I think they said that was like 25 or 35% of their congregation was in small groups. And they wanted to move that up to 65. Well, part of that was understanding that we don't have enough leaders yet in order to support that. So how do we go about building resources so that we can get more people involved in small groups? For them, that was providing pretty much a bookstore in a way online, so that someone who wants to lead a group, someone who wants to maybe step into that leadership role, wasn't on their own. They had a library of resources that they could go to. They added in the ability to rate resources and comment on them. So part of that was building an infrastructure to support the growth of those small groups. So that's where it comes into the show acts, the act piece, where you're saying, we value communities, these are the resources, and this is what we're doing as an organization to live out our mission. And then the other thing is, where does our mission differ from reality? So we've got touch points, content, and design. And does anybody know what a touch point is? Okay, so it's helpful then. A touch point is any interaction that someone has with your organization. So it's a lot of different things. For many of the churches that I talk with, and we're walking through a process that we go through with them, is just understanding what touch points they have. So we have signage, digital signage in our courtyard, and it's replaying different events that are coming up. We have an email newsletter that we send out to the congregation. We have social media. We pay for ads in the newspaper. So there's different things that you do, these different touch points. And one of the problems that people have is because there are so many touch points, there's not alignment with what your mission, vision, values are and what you're communicating to the people. And so that creates kind of a gap in your ministry process. So how you communicate, and one of the next slides I have is kind of shows what that would look like. But the touch points, because there are so many, it kind of gets scary. Like, You mean every interaction, so the volunteer, the way the bathrooms are upkept. Like these things reflect on your organization. I generally deal with not the bathrooms. I'm not worried about that. You guys can figure out how to clean your bathrooms. I'm worried more about the digital communication pieces. So is your website living out your mission and values, and is it enabling people to become a part of that? What I found, and I generally ask a question, and it's a pretty simple question. Do you feel that you're able to live out your mission, vision, and values through your website? And at that point, I generally either get laughed at or told that that's almost impossible. And so the problem with that is they do have a pretty clear idea of what their mission, vision, and values are. It's just how do we translate that? How do we get it into a place where it's reality, where our mission, vision, and values connect with our audience, and it's able to bring people together? So I think this statement is really what all those digital communications, the email, social media, have in common. It's when your mission and people don't line up, things fall apart. So if you're not able to make those connections for them, if you're not able to get them connected with your mission, vision, and values, you leave them in the regular and new, and they don't become followers of Christ. And so as you can see, if you're doing a Venn diagram, it'd be mission and people, and where they overlap would be your ministry process. But if you don't have alignment, there's a gap there, and there's no connection. I think where this comes in, one of the churches we worked with did a survey of their congregation and asked them, what's our mission, vision, and values? And like most, they had a three-pronged mission, vision, and values. It was connect people in community, connect people to God, and then serve in our community. And all those had a tagline of serve like Jesus, join a community, or becoming community like Jesus. In that survey, what one of the respondents said was, love like Jesus, serve like Jesus, and something else like Jesus. So you get the idea. They hadn't been bought in. They didn't know what the mission, the vision, and the values was. So there was no on-ramp. There was no way for them to get connected with that last piece, was kind of serving in their community. And that was one of the problems they were having. Like, people weren't serving in their local community. They got missions, they got global, well, sort of. They got that you can donate to a missionary. They were really looking for people to get involved in mission trips. And so part of this was also serving in the community for them meant hosting outreach events at the church. So we did a fireworks show, and we needed volunteers, and everybody came to that fireworks show, and that was our way of serving in the community. Wasn't really ideal, and it wasn't really connecting people to their mission, which was to serve everywhere. So serving everywhere meant getting out into the parking lot and lighting off fireworks. For them, what we went ahead and did and what we walked through was like, how can people get involved in service opportunities? What does that look like at your church? And it was really kind of defining what is. So don't move forward without understanding the current situation. So when you're going through this process and trying to understand kind of the state of things. So people aren't connected with our mission, vision, and values, and we have the people and where they're not connected. What's the reality there? What's not connecting? And in this case, it was, we want people to serve in the community, and the only thing that we were offering them to do was to be a part of these large outreach events that happened on campus. So now we had to move into the phase where, okay, what could we do? Where are there opportunities in the community for us to serve? Where are there opportunities to partner with some other organizations? And in that point, that's when they got excited and they started listing, and they said, oh, there's hundreds of opportunities that we have. The local food pantry place needs 20 volunteers every Saturday to volunteer. The retirement home would love to have a choir or somebody come and sing. And so these areas where the church could be a light in the community, they were apparent to that church, but they had never been able to show that to everybody else. And so defining what is, so Usually when you have a map, you know where you're going, and that's kind of the mission, vision, and values of where you want to be, and understanding where you are right now and what is helpful. Because if you have to cross a lake or a canyon to get to here, you want to know that, right? You don't want to start out on a path and not know what's going to be in front of you, what you're starting out with. And part of that comes into the next piece is define your ability. So what skills, resources, what do you have as a church that you can enact? What can you bring to bear to build out your ministry process? When we're working with churches, the idea of copying comes up. I know that ministry over there is getting great results. I know they're doing what we want to do. And what happens here is, okay, you understand that they're doing what they're doing, and you want to copy that. But how could you actually build that out in your community? How can you live that out yourself? What resources, what people, what volunteers do you need to get? Is that even a reality with what you're capable of doing? And if you don't have that, you're going to spin your wheels, because you're going to start building out ministry processes. You're going to start doing different things in order to be like that church over there when you don't have the resources, the ability to live it out. And, you know, one of the people that I talked with had a saying, and it was, it hurts my heart when we're trying to be like that church, because that church isn't who we are. So trying to define your strategy and understanding like what God has called you to do is important. You have to understand what your abilities are. So share that. And the last piece is define success. If you don't define success, you'll never be able to tell if you've reached your destination. So when we're looking at that, when we're thinking about the people, what does success look like? Is it 20 people involved in small groups? Is it 30 people involved in small groups? Or we want 150 people serving and volunteering. We want to increase online giving. We want to get more people engaged in social media, and we have a kind of a metrics around that. Because when you're able to define success, it's really clear what you're trying to accomplish. You understand where you are right now and your ability to get to that place. And that's kind of the path or the strategy that you're looking at, is how do we take what is our abilities and we understand where we're going and kind of having those all align. And that's the part where the strategy comes into play and what you're trying to go after.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.